And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is yes and releasing resistance. In other words, empowering ourselves to be able to be more fully engaged with life and to respond most appropriately in the most empowering ways through presence. Yes and. So before we get started, let's just take a couple minutes to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your molecules, all your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that allows us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning, Darlene. I don't think you've made a presence here before. Welcome. It's so great to have you here today, both of you, and everybody else who's joining us. And today we're riffing on something that we talked about yesterday, which is yes and releasing resistance. And what does that look like in our lives? What does it open up for us? So, and good morning, Shosha. Welcome. Great to have you joining us. So, this idea of releasing resistance doesn't mean being complacent, by the way. I mean, if there are things in the world that, and there are, that demand our attention and that call us into action, of course, we're going to get called into action. Denial or resistance makes our action oftentimes reactive. So what that looks like is we want things to be different from the way they are. And I understand that. I totally get wanting things to be different from the way they are. And in order to be the most effective that we can be, we get to be present to the way things are, right? Even if we don't like them. So when we're present to the way things are, we getting into the conversation of it should be different, or all the it's not right, and the outrage and the upset that allows us perhaps to be alert to something deep in us that's getting triggered and feeling threatened, and we get to work through that and use the awareness of that upset as an inroad to maybe some self-healing. And once we get to the place where we can release the resistance and actually be present to what is, then we're in the moment, and then openings appear that might have not even been visible previously when we were in our reactive state. And I hope this is making sense. It's not a matter of being blind. Good morning, Brandy. Wonderful to have you joining us this morning. Welcome. We're talking about receiving life, really. Yes, and so in improv, which I haven't engaged in, but I know people who have, And they have told me that the foundational premise of improv is yes and. In other words, we receive whatever there is to receive, and rather than resisting it, pushing it away, trying to rewrite it, trying to overpower it, whatever, we go with that. And it reminds me also of what is it called? A martial art where you're using the other person's momentum to redirect them. So, oh, well, I can't think of it at the moment. So Shosha says, I've never considered how denial and resistance are sisters, not twins, but related nevertheless. Absolutely. Denial and resistance are very related, because if we're denying the truth of something, we're creating a resistance, right? So this shows up in so many ways. Um, and when we I'll get back around to that, but when we are in denial or when we're in resistance, we're not able to redirect the energy that's moving. If we can imagine that everything is an energetic environment, I think this is an interesting perspective to try on, to imagine that there's all this energy moving, right? When we're denying something, we're kind of stopping the movement of that energy. Same thing as resisting. When we're resisting, we're stopping the movement of that energy. And when we can recognize what's present, then we're in that flow of energy, and it allows us to redirect that energy more effectively, right? Because we're present to it, we can get out of the way of it, we can redirect it, and it's flowing. Good morning and welcome, Jennifer. How wonderful. Wow, we really have a party here this morning. It's great to have everybody here. So when we look at our lives, we're talking about denial and resistance, and it plays on every level. But when we look at our own lives and maybe our past, and maybe things about our past that we're not so happy with, we might be inclined to deny it. We might be inclined to resist it, partly because we're probably inclined to judge it and to judge ourselves. And I don't find as much value in judgment as I do in observation. And so if we can look at these parts of ourselves, or these expressions of ourselves, these events where we may have felt ashamed of ourselves or our behavior, or we can look and say yes and, instead of yes but. So justification is another form of resistance and denial, in a way. If we can just find a place of acceptance, it's like, okay, yes, that happened. Yes, and now I have the opportunity to make different choices. Yes, and now I have a different perspective. Yes, and I can choose a new path from here. So yes, and what am I going to make that mean? How about that? So curiosity, I often say this, and it's just such a powerful thing to remember, is that curiosity is an antidote to judgment. So we all have things in our lives where we behaved less than optimally. And for years of my life, I was very much caught in the trap of the imbalance around those things and my focus on those things, to the exclusion of the other side of the coin and all the great things that I did, or the wonderful ways I behaved, or the things that were fulfilling and rewarding that I accomplished. And I don't think I'm alone in this predisposition to weigh the negative more heavily than the positive. And so we look at the things that are places of disappointment, upset, anger, frustration, shame, guilt, and we will tend to dwell on that more than the triumphs and the contributions and the generative behaviors and the love and the joy. And I am inclined to say that that's not realistic. It's not realistic. Um, I think that in so many ways we are programmed to beat the heck out of ourselves for ways that we've been. And I had a client come back to me after a couple years from our completion together, and they were berating themselves, saying that they were clueless at the time of the work that we did together, and now they have a whole new perspective. And I said, we are where we are when we are there, right? And I'm not a fan of berating the butterfly for having been a caterpillar. We go through our transitions, we go through our growth, and a big part of that growth is recognition and curiosity, because as long as we're in denial or resistance to the fact of who we've been, for example, the more we're mired in it, the more we're bound to it. And we can look at this is another really interesting example of this. So this is from years ago, years and years ago. There was a husband and wife team, and the husband did something that was really not good. And it created a tremendous, I don't even know what it was he did, actually, but it created a tremendous rift in their relationship, and an upheaval. And he said to her at one point, and is he said to her at one point, "You know me. This is totally out of character. This is not who I am. Can you forgive that instance?" And this was an argument that she couldn't deny, that it was totally uncharacteristic of him. And she gave him a pass because she recognized it was totally out of character. And that kind of thing can happen. So it's interesting how in other circumstances, someone would have taken that one thing and allowed that one thing to define the entire relationship, when there was this whole body of other evidence, so to speak, of a different person, of a different quality of relationship. So Shosha says, love that in the scales of judgment, goodness is as light as a bird's wing, and negativity is as heavy as a stone. Beautifully envisioned. Wow, that's gorgeous. Thank you, Shosha. So this is true. It's really interesting how sternly we judge ourselves. And I think it's valuable to recognize that we live in a culture where we are enculturated to good and bad and punishment, right? If you don't toe the line, if you don't behave properly, then you deserve to be punished. And we have learned, each of us, to become quite skilled in being self-punishing. And it's the glass half full, glass half empty conversation. There's 4 ounces of water in the glass, in the 8-ounce glass. And we can either focus on the part of the glass that's not full, that doesn't have water, or we can focus on the part that has water, or we can recognize that the glass and the water are in a relationship to each other, that the air and the water, whatever, are in relationship to each other, and it's both. It's not either or. And I love the notion of the coin with heads and tails, and the separation that is that we make between heads and tails, and we don't pay attention to the edge of the coin that is connecting them. So when we do yes and, to go back to the original premise that we're talking about, when we go back to yes and, it allows us to be more fully present. It's like, yes, this occurred, and I get a choice to make the meaning I choose for it. Yes, and I receive it, and now what? Years ago, and I've said this so many times, but years ago, I had the opportunity to volunteer at an event. It was a week-long event with the Dalai Lama. And the thing that I took with me that still is so, so powerful, I imagine it's sort of a guiding principle, is that all suffering is a function of misconceptualization. In other words, the way that I've translated that is that, yes, we're going to experience pain. Pain is undeniable, unavoidable. But the suffering comes from prolonging that pain. And it comes from the way we're thinking about it, the misconceptualization. It comes from the stories that we're making about it, that we then carry into every other portion of our lives. And if we can experience our experience when we're experiencing it, rather than resisting the emotion, resisting the pain, resisting the upset, if we just allow it to process through, if we allow ourselves to experience it, it dissipates. And this is magical, actually. And I have experienced this over and over and over again, and taught my clients to do the same. And it's miraculous, the results. So even when feeling physical or emotional pain, so many of us, if we're in an upset, we just want to push it away. We want to pretend, we want to overpower it. We want to transform our state. And so many of us in the personal development realm are incredibly adept at transforming our state. I'm just going to do some personal voodoo and make it go away. I'm just going to breathe different. I'm going to stand different. I'm going to make it go away. And there's tremendous value to that skill. I'm not going to belittle that at all. However, I'm of the belief that the foundational emotions are a communication from our being that may be sending up a red flag to say, hey, this needs attention. And given we can't always attend to it in that minute. But for instance, I'm just thinking for right this moment, grief, in the loss of a loved one, perhaps. The thing that we need to realize is that these emotions are not linear. particularly grief. Okay. It's not linear. And so we often just sort of try to motor through it. However, when we allow ourselves to feel the feeling, actually to locate the sensations of that emotion in our bodies and breathe into it and allow the experience of it, no resistance, no denial, not making meaning about it, just experiencing the energy. Remember, this is an energetic system, experiencing the energy of that emotion in our body and being. Sometimes it will intensify and it may even feel unbearable. But as we breathe into it, as we allow it, again, no story, feeling the sensation, what happens is it dissolves, it dissipates. And I have done this so many times with physical pain as well. Rather than trying to pretend that something doesn't hurt, to go more deeply into the experience of the sensation. And I can tell you that as I have done that more and more, these sensations just dissipate. It's freaking miraculous. Brandy says, I am self-punishing. I didn't realize just how bad. Well, Brandy, I have to say, I don't think you're alone, honey. So we're taught to be self-punishing, especially if we grew up in a household where we got punished. Our parents, well-meaning, not well-meaning, whatever, our parents are our greatest teachers. They teach us who we are. They teach us how to treat us. So if they punish us when we're bad, and what is bad? Bad is often just not complying with the authority, which is an interesting thing, right? We're indoctrinated to be complying or else we get punished. And we comply for fear of being punished in so many ways. We internalize those behaviors. So we do something that creates an upset for ourselves or for others, and then we punish ourselves. The thing is that we're often much more cruel in our self-punishing than anybody ever was to us. Like we run off the rails a lot of times with this self-punishing stuff. And we focus on what we did wrong rather than all the great things that we do or all the great ways that we be. Right? So then we follow that up, or part of that self-punishing process is, why am I so lazy? What's wrong with me? Why can't I get out of my way? Listen to those questions. Well, our brains are wired to answer questions. So if I say, what's wrong with me? My brain's going to come back with all kinds of things that are wrong with me. If I say, why can't I get out of my own way? I'm going to find all kinds of reasons why I can't get out of my own way. And so this self-talk, a lot of us have done affirmations and such, but if we are doing affirmations and our self-talk is, what's wrong with me? Then what we need to do, Darlene says, I can relate to what you're talking about. Darlene, honestly, I think pretty much everybody can relate to this on some level. Some of us are more brutal to ourselves than others. And some of us, have learned to speak more lovingly to ourselves. I mean, if you were raising you as a child, would you want a parent, or would you want to be a parent that is loving and affirming, or would you want a parent that is destructive? That would you want your child ending up beating themselves up, or would you want your child to grow up feeling that they're okay? right? So we get to reparent ourselves. And rather than beating ourselves up, what about, oh, honey, I'm so sorry you were so hurt that you reacted that way? Or what is it you need right now to be able to make better choices? So these questions that we ask ourselves, really important questions, really important to our state of being, really important to our growth. Darlene says, I'm pretty brutal to myself coming from a very strict reformative household. I'm trying to learn how to not be so hard on myself and undo all of it. So I can say that in my own evolution from that kind of behavior came from deliberately talking to myself like, oh honey, what's going on with you? What is it you need? Like, to be speaking to ourselves with compassion, to recognize that there is a hurt child in there who needs to be reparented, most likely, particularly if you're really brutal to yourself, is it, and if you catch yourself, this is the important piece where grace comes in, is to be able to catch yourself speaking to yourself in a brutal way or asking really destructive questions, to catch yourself and say, oh wow, how can we connect better? How can I connect better with that child that I have been carrying around? The wounded child is often the one at the helm making the decisions. And do we want a wounded 3-year-old making our life decisions for us? And that's really what happens. So we get to reparent that child. We know what it could be to be that compassionate, loving adult, guide, and parent, right? Not as the punishing parent, but as the benevolent and loving parent. So that's it for today. I am so glad to have had everybody here. What a fun party to have everybody engaged. It's really a gift to have the opportunity to be with you all. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern every weekday morning. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description on the Facebook page for Enlightened World Network. And I just have so much gratitude for you